Hey up lads, hey up loves, it's the Yorkshireman again, and we're here with part 2 of my James O'Brien videos. Now, I'd just like to point out, before we get into this next series of clips, that I actually don't think that James O'Brien is a bad person. I genuinely don't. I think when he talks and when he speaks to his callers and when he speaks to the public on his radio show, I think in his mind he is being Mr. Tolerant, Mr. Liberal, and Mr. Politically Correct, if I have to use that phrase. But sometimes in the pursuit of virtue, we don't always come across as the virtuous people that we're trying to portray ourselves to be. I think it's much, much better to be honest and open. Don't care about how you look to other people or how nice you are on the scale of Mr. Nice Guy and Mr. Bastard. Just be open and honest. You're never going to be able to please all of the people all of the time. And I always say it's much, much better to be truthful and honest than to paint an image that ain't quite true but makes you look like a saviour or a white knight. Anyway, let's carry on with the clips.
Embarked upon an ego trip of such epic and international impact that...
For a moment there, I thought that James was actually talking about himself. But no, I jest. He's actually talking about Donald Trump, the President of the United States. And I can't believe I'm saying that, but he is. And James has got a few words to say about Trump.
We should all be very, very scared.
Now, to be honest with you, when the whole Trump campaign for president thing began, I didn't really know that much about him. And I was one of the people who was taking the piss out of him, along with pretty much every other person on the bloody planet. But as it went on and he started to pick up popularity, I noticed a couple of things. One thing was that people would always accuse his supporters of being violent and aggressive, but then when you notice that the Bernie supporters were being equally aggressive and violent to people, everyone suddenly started ignoring that, and I thought, oh yeah, that's a bit strange, isn't it? But then the other thing I noticed was that he wasn't actually all the things that people were accusing him of being. They were accusing him of being Hitler, and basically now anyone who you don't like, just accuse them of being Hitler. But also I didn't see any signs that he was a racist, sexist, misogynistic homophobe. You know, he's a rich idiot, I can put it like that, and if you ever watch the panorama about him building his golf course in Scotland and the way that him and his son, particularly his son, behaved towards the locals, forcing them off the land so they could build a golf course, I remember thinking, yeah, he's a little bit of a twat. But all of these accusations, I was thinking, they're not really holding any water here, and it's becoming quite obvious that they're trying their best to paint him in this light and make him out to be something he's not. And whilst I started off by not liking him, I got to a point where I was thinking, well, you know, you might not like the guy, but you can't go around saying things that technically aren't true unless you've got evidence to back it up. And nobody had any evidence other than what they felt. And what you feel, lads and lasses, is not evidence for anything. But to bring us back right round like a big wheel of cheese, to James O'Brien's little comment there that we should all be very, very scared. No, James, we shouldn't.
That's the bridge I'll die on, so to speak. You have to provide some pretty epic evidence that he's not, in order to make me think again. Kim Jong-un, I only know what I've been told by the Western media.
I thought you were the Western media, mate. Also, you're not going to hear it from the North Korean media, are you? There are lots of Western media and journalists who risk an awful lot to get inside there and try and report on exactly what it is that's going on. And also, try looking at some of the people who've managed to get out and tell you what it's like. Listen to what they say about North Korea.
And more importantly, by NGOs and charities and human rights organisations that seek to get on the ground in places like that. You know, starvation level, poverty in many parts of that particular country. But I don't know much about North Korea.
Well, there's a New Year's resolution for you, James. Maybe try looking into what it's like and see if socialism sounds like such a juicy idea once you've spent a month in there. Also, what more do you need to know? There are people who are starving to death, who are resorting to cannibalism, who have no electricity, no food, nothing. If you think that the Western media are lying, then why don't you put your money where your mouth is? Go over, have a look for yourself, see if you can confirm it. But to be honest, that chair in the LBC studio looks very comfy, doesn't it?
I wouldn't want to live there, and he does appear to knock off anybody that displeases him.
Yes, that's That's absolutely right. That's what he does. That's the kind of dictatorship that they're living under. People who have no choice but to live like that. But now I get the feeling that you're going to sort of compare Trump to Kim Jong-un and to the North Korean regime and try and make out that he's as bad of a dictator as Kim Jong-un. Let's see if that's what you do.
So you would think, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when there was still a sort of broad consensus on the fact that the earth was round and the sun would come up in the morning, now they get called alternative facts by people like Kellyanne Conway.
So, not talking about Trump, talking about Kellyanne Conway and her alternative facts. Well, I agree that the term alternative facts was completely ridiculous, but I also am of the broad consensus that a lot of American news interviews aren't really the in-depth journalistic interview that they should be. A lot of the time they turn into slanging matches where people are just shouting over each other, just talking about what they think and what they feel. A little bit like James O'Brien, but just not as whispery or smug or condescending.
A couple of years ago, there would have been a broad consensus, wouldn't there? That, I mean, who's even the good guy?
Well, James, he's normally flying in the sky with a cape whispering behind him in the wind, and the bad guy normally is stroking a pussy sat in a big chair with an army of henchmen around him who can't shoot a fish in a fucking barrel. But again, this is where James O'Brien's talking sort of goes off into Wonderland, because I don't know how we've gone from the first point of talking about Trump and his ego to now talking about who's the good guys, who's the bad guys. James, I can honestly say I don't have a bloody clue, mate. But I think we all know who the good guy is in James O'Brien's mind. It's himself.
Who's even the goodies? Do we have to get into bed with America if Donald Trump does decide to undertake military action against North Korea? Or if he has to respond to military action that North Korea undertake because he's provoked them? Do we have to get involved in that because we're so desperate to be in bed with America for trade reasons post-Brexit?
We're back to Trumping again, and we've even managed to shoehorn Brexit in there, somehow. But what he's basically saying is, would we have to team up with America if they ever went to war with North Korea? Well, just to let you into something here, James, if North Korea were ever stupid enough to actually try and start a war with America, it would literally be over in 4 minutes, because North Korea couldn't wipe shit off their own shoes, let alone fire a nuclear missile and start a nuclear war with America. America would wipe them off the face of the earth. Now, I think we can all sensibly and reasonably, by using our common sense, agree that nuclear war is a very, very bad idea, because whether we chose to get involved or not, it would affect everybody on this planet. So it's probably not going to happen. What's probably happening is there's a lot of bombasting, and people have kind of let Kim Jong-un bark away like a little chihuahua in the corner, and Trump is a bit like Caesar Milan, coming in there, slapping the dog on the arse and telling it, no, you need to know where you stand in the world, and trust me, mate, it is not very high, okay? But if you genuinely think that there's going to be a nuclear war started over two guys measuring their own dicks, then it sounds to me like you're fear-mongering a little bit. And also, James, why would we want to team up with America? Because they're our closest allies. And it's not about trade deals post-Brexit, mate. We would have teamed up with America whether there was Brexit or not. And in case you're only just realising that, then you're a little bit late to the party, cock.
That'd be great, wouldn't it? Brexit leads us into a nuclear war.
But, yeah, it's not going to lead us into a nuclear war, mate. Again, you've managed to bring it back to Brexit like the salty Ramona that you are. Shut up about it.
And, I mean, the likelihood of setting off a nuclear missile, there's a very, very worrying report. I think it was in the New York Times.
Oh, the New York Times. It'll definitely be factually accurate then.
It was about, in the run-up to the election, when you start having meetings with the national security advisors, and Trump was obsessed with the question of why they had nuclear bombs if they never used them. So this little sort of man-child brain can't process nuanced thought. It can't do complicated, sophisticated thought.
Oops. Sorry, James. I thought you were talking about yourself again there. Yes, Trump is not the deepest thinker. He's no philosopher, but he is the president. And I would take anything reported by the New York Times with a massive rock of salt. But again, I ask you, and I ask all the lads and lasses out there who are listening, do you really think that Trump would just sit there and put his finger on the nuclear button because he could? Do you not think there would be lots and lots of people around him who would be saying, oh, don't do that. That would be very, very bad if he did that. Do you not think there'd be lots of people who would actually try to stop him, both legally and physically, from doing that for no reason?
The briefing notes he gets given, if they're more than half a page long, his advisors now know that he won't read them.
Citation needed, James. Also, if you get a caller who has any shred of intellect or argument, you won't listen to them. Checkmate, mate.
Half a page is about the limit of his attention span. So when you tell him he's got a nuclear bomb, he doesn't understand why he can't use it.
I think he does, James. Let's just move on from that.
He doesn't understand the kind of curiously contradictory nature of deterrent. Why have you got a nuclear bomb? Well, so that the other fella doesn't use his. Well, what if we didn't have a nuclear bomb? Well, then the other fella might. It's not necessarily watertight logic, but it's the history, it's the historical rationale of a deterrent.
And that right there, James, is exactly the argument. The reason why we still have nuclear weapons. Because if somebody else has them, and you've got them, then the likelihood is that nobody's going to use them because they're going to be worried about if the other person uses their nuclear bombs on them. You've just said it there. And I think that Trump, despite the fact that he is a little bit of a clown, and he is a little bit of an idiot, I think he's going to be able to grasp that. But the problem is, James, you're not talking about him as if he is a clown or a plonker. You're talking about him as if he is a literal mental handicap. And he's not, is he, James?
I can't ask you, can I, without answering the question myself?
Sorry, James, I didn't realise you were even asking us. I thought you were just talking to yourself there. I know that you love the sound of your own voice, but go on then, answer the question. I'm sure we're all dying to hear the answer.
Yeah, I think it's possible. I really do. I find the White House in particular so absolutely impenetrable to understand how anybody can feel anything but, at best, I suppose, disgust, and at worst, abject terror.
Hey, it's funny, isn't it? When we have an actual terror attack, what do they always say to us? Just keep calm and carry on. Go about your life as if nothing happened. In fact, just pretend that nothing happened. We'll just carry on as we are. But Donald Trump comes along, gets democratically elected to the position of president, and what does this guy say? Run! Run in terror! He's gonna nuke the world!
When they look at what is happening in that particular cradle of democracy, I guess I think anything's possible now. Absolutely anything.
Do you think Donald Trump's going to eat his own head? No? Well then clearly, not everything is possible, is it, James? See, the way he's talking here, it's just like that episode of South Park, where the terrorists attack our imagination. If he has control over your imagination and he can make you think that anything could happen, then he's got you in the palm of his sweaty, hairy, troll-like hand.
If you can hire somebody to go onto Fox News and say that you're the finest orator in the history of the world, or words to that effect, when, frankly, you can't even string a sentence together, literally you can't string a sentence together, then yeah, I think anything's possible. And I think his regard for human life, any human life except his own, seems to be just sort of twisted.
Now that's a pretty bold statement there, James, and I really think that you need to cite some evidence as to how he disregards all other human life apart from his own, and that he's twisted. But again, if we go by the imagination rule, or the fact that we just slap the label of Hitler on anybody that we don't like, then yeah, I can see how in your mind, in your twisted mind, you can see that. But to be honest, for somebody on the outside who doesn't view life through the lenses that you do, I honestly can't see it, mate. Please, prove me wrong. Give me some evidence.
To a point where I find it terrifyingly plausible that our oldest ally, or our greatest ally, is led by a man who I think is probably perfectly capable of starting a war just to satisfy his own ego and distract the American people from the growing evidence of epic corruption and collusion at the heart of his administration.
Hey, well, that's all very cute, James, and I'm sure that that in no way has instilled a very negative vibe amongst your listeners and the people watching you right now. But if I were to just grab that stone out of the air which you've just cast, and if I were to just throw it back towards you, if I were to just alter a few of those words for you and make it sound a little bit more like this. That your show, the James O'Brien Show, is presented by a man who is probably perfectly capable to stoke up national tensions to satisfy his own ego and to listen to the sound of his own voice and distract the British people from the growing evidence of corruption and collusion at the heart of the media and the elitist establishment of which he, in all his troll-like form, are a part of. You might want to stick the kettle on and have a little think about that one, Jim Bob. And next time you're walking round your house, go find a mirror, have a look in it and see what looks back. But I think we all know that James O'Brien doesn't have any mirrors in his house. I mean, look at his hair. Anyway, that's part 2. Join me again in part 3. Lads and lasses, see you in a bit.